We've been telling you about the violence that continues to plague the Mexican border and continue to urge citizens to be careful. If you're planning on traveling there, make sure you watch out, make sure you know where you're going. However, our next guest says most of the media is portraying all of Mexico as if it were a hotbed of violence when it's really only a couple spots. Rodrigo Esponda is the Midwest Regional Director of the Mexico Tourism Board. Good to have you here. Thanks very much. So I guess the big question, definitively, is it safe to travel in Mexico?
Yes, definitely. It is very safe to travel to Mexico. As you just said, the incidents happening in the border are concentrated just in 4 points in the northwest part of Mexico. It is not all over Mexico, and tourism destinations are perfectly fine. The fact that right now there are thousands of American tourists having a really nice time in Mexico really supports this point.
I guess it's scary, though, because, you know, I came from California, and we would go over the border from San Diego. We'd go into Tijuana. That's one of the municipalities that's seeing some serious violence there, isn't it?
Yes, well, you know, the incidents that have been happening in the border are concentrated in those 4 points, but the people who have been related to this is people who are into gangs. It's not common people, and tourists are perfectly fine to travel all over Mexico.
We have a map that we're showing right now, and there are several spots that we've heard of, Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, things like that. Are those cities safe, the real tourist hotspots? Do you consider those safe for tourists to go to?
Yes, perfectly. The destinations that you just mentioned, Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, Cancun, Riviera Maya, right now have very good percentage rates of occupancy. And the tourism attractions, the Mexican hospitality that has always been there, and our beaches are unbeatable. The peso exchange dollar right now stretches much more, and tourists are really looking for value, so they are getting that in Mexico, plus the cultural attractions.
Yeah, definitely.
So the destinations are fine.
It's a great place to go, but again, we don't want anybody going there and getting killed, and there are violent areas. I mean, I know Rosarito Beach, which is on the Baja side of Mexico, is a violent city. There are daylight shootings, there are beheadings there. Would you warn people to stay away from that city?
No, Juliet, with all due respect, you know, so far, none of the tourists who have been going down to Mexico, and there have been thousands of tourists going down to Mexico, have been affected by any incident at all. There are no national Mexicans or international tourists who have been affected into any incident. So that is really what we want to clarify.
Why do you think it's just staying, I'm sorry to interrupt, but why do you think it's just staying in these specified locations? I mean, I know that some of the cities that were mentioned that are cities that you should probably stay away from would be Tijuana, Nogales, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. Why is it staying localized in these areas and not bleeding off into other major areas like Cancun, for instance?
Well, you know, those places that you just mentioned is exactly where the drug trafficking organizations are based, and the Mexican government are really fighting them. But the incident happening there in those points are happening between them or the Mexican police that are not affecting people, regular people, or tourists. The destinations that you just mentioned, Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, plus the Mexican cities, the colonial cities are very good. We have many UNESCO World Heritage sites that are cities that are perfectly fine and that really worth the trip going down precisely right now, where Mexican competitive advantages stretches much more.
So, Rodrigo, I guess the obvious advice would just be to make sure that you know where you're going, stay in lit areas, all the obvious precautions. Thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you, Juliet.
All righty. Who are we going to next?